And joining me now from London is Negah Angha, an Iranian specialist at King's College and also a former advisor to the Biden administration. Thank you so much for your time. First of all, we just heard there from our Iranian correspondent in Tehran that there's been no confirmation as yet from the Iranians about the death of Larijani. But could you perhaps explain what does this mean for the Iranian leadership at this point?
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. Look, I think, again, if confirmed, Larijani being killed is a major blow to the Iranian system, but it doesn't necessarily mean it ends it. Just means that the regime is going to continue to harden and close in on ranks. And I think, one of the things that is important for us to take into consideration is that, Larijani himself was a good buffer. He was able to negotiate, and he was part of some of the negotiating conversations in relation to the U.S. negotiations. And, not having someone who could be an interlocutor will make things harder as, we're looking at hopefully ending the war or finding an off-ramp to end this war. And usually as we go through this process and all these top leaders and commanders are killed, the system, the IRGC has already built 2 to 3 or 4 even layers down in terms of their succession process. What happens is, again, as they start to close ranks, they're going to become even more suspicious of their surrounding, and they're going to be even more hardened and digging in their heels. So negotiations will be harder.
Do we have any idea, however, as to who's actually in charge now, be it either the Republican Guard or the Basij force?
Well, I think the Basij is essentially the paramilitary arm under the IRGC control. So they're used to suppress protesters. You see them, driving around, imposing restrictions on the average citizen. So, the Basiji chief being killed, doesn't necessarily suddenly dismantle this repression apparatus. What it does is it's trying to show optics of sort of a breakdown of these various top leaders. The IRGC, however, has closed in ranks. There's a few of them. They essentially are the backbone of this wartime state. They're surrounded by essentially Mojtaba Khamenei is the supreme leader. He was essentially chosen and pushed by the IRGC commanders. And again, they have a command structure in place so that as one leader is taken out, or one one who has a leadership type profile is taken out, then you have the next layer and the next layer. I think what gets concerning for people, governments in the West, is as this sort of layering keeps going further and further down, there's less of an understanding of who they are. And that becomes a little bit more complicated, a little bit more disjointed. Again, there's an inherent fear amongst themselves internally. Even staying inside Tehran is a bit concerning, and you see them sort of spreading out across the country to not only stay protected, but that kind of disparate sort of separation can also cause some miscommunications too.
The Israeli Prime Minister has just been speaking on Israeli television, and Netanyahu saying that the killing of Larijani gives Iranians the chance to overthrow their rulers. So I'm curious to know, where does this leave the opposition on the ground? Because clearly it's far too dangerous for people to take to the streets, given the ongoing aerial bombardment.
One of the things that Israel has been trying to do, and I think one of the reasons, sort of essentially, if true, if confirmed, the killing of the Basiji chief and the bombing of a lot of Basiji checkpoints is to show sort of the optics that Israel is sort of taking out the forces, taking out the checkpoints that harass the people, and the inherent fear that people have about coming out onto the streets and protesting. The issue is that, as as this continues, this sort of viable political transition becomes a bit of a fear amongst the people. I think as your sort of anchor on the ground in Iran was explaining, there is this people are tired. There is this constant fear. There's not only the bombings that they're concerned about, but even in the middle of the night, you have the CG, patrols going through the streets, booming from the loudspeakers, whether it's chants or songs of the regime and enforcing the regime. So there's just this inherent fear throughout the society. You do have many people still wanting a regime change, but this indiscriminate killing that's taking place makes it harder for people to come out in the same way as they used to.
So is regime change at this point in time a fantasy?
I think, the problem is that when we talk about potential regime change, I think the timetable is a very difficult conversation to have, right? So regime change isn't going to necessarily happen overnight. There has been no signs of an organized dissent while Iran is under attack. Israeli officials themselves have acknowledged that there is no certainty that this government will fall tomorrow. And I think, again, we need to bear in mind that it could be eventual. I think right now what's happening, because we're under a wartime situation, you have more of the security factions and all of the different types of entities that are connected to the IRGC, because the IRGC has their fingers in everything, whether it's the political, the military, and the economics. And so that entire apparatus has not put down their arms. They haven't come out against the regime. And if this sort of rally around the flag moment continues, it's harder to see the regime falling. It could eventually, but I think in terms of the here and now over the next few weeks, it seems highly unlikely.
And what does the killing of Larijani mean for the Americans? Does it hasten a pivot to an exit strategy or not?
We've seen reporting right now that the White House itself, the national security experts, the policy experts, the economic experts around President Trump have been sort of advising President Trump that that he should take a victory lap right now, and sort of being able to find that window is narrowing very quickly. You have the hawks who are encouraging to maintain a sustained pressure. I think Israel having taken out it, and again, if confirmed, some of these top leadership profiles, it does give Washington kind of that additional window to continue in this fight. It strengthens the argument that the campaign could continue to take out more leadership profiles. There would be more sort of strategic returns in this case. But the economics and the U.S. domestic politics is, I think, going to play a much larger factor in terms of where Trump will land. Israel has said that they're going to continue on this campaign for another 3 weeks or so. So we're going to have to see. It does give some legs. But quite frankly, there's so many other factors in this, especially the economics, that will, I think, change potentially the calculus of the president.
And that indeed was my next question. It still leaves the Strait of Hormuz and its immediate impact on the global economy, which of course the Iranian regime can still use as leverage. Do you think the ongoing economic pressure might actually hasten Trump's decision to end the war, given that he is seen as being rather unpredictable in the way he makes decisions?
I think it will definitely play a large factor in his decision-making process. I think, again, it'll be a confluence of things. I don't think there will be one single component. As we've seen, this is such a complex situation. So whether it's sort of the pressure by allies, it's pressure by, the heads of states of the Gulf region, and also sort of the CEOs, the major corporations, the impact impact that this is having not only on shipping vessels, but eventually sort of the downstream of whether gas prices being extremely high, we're seeing higher prices at the pump in the United States, but also the impact on food, as we've seen. Again, all these vessels are being delayed, which means, again, the ripple effect will take months. The U.S. is about to enter into its midterm elections. And as we know, voters usually vote based on their pocketbook. And if things are going to, the inflation continues, things are going to continue to be expensive, that will have an impact. The American public has been very clear that they do not want to enter into any more forever wars. And in general, the idea of this taking place in the Middle East creates this allergic reaction that we might be entering into something that will be more prolonged than the American public will be content with. That has an impact on how the American public will vote, be it now or by the time we get to the presidential elections.
Negah Angha, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.